We all carry emotional scars, some of them so deeply embedded within us that we don't even recognize them. These scars are the result of early experiences, things we might have experienced as children that, at the time, we couldn't fully process or understand. Abandonment, neglect, emotional unavailability. These wounds, though often buried beneath the surface, continue to shape how we interact with the world around us. They affect how we view ourselves, how we form relationships, and most importantly, how we love. When we have these unhealed wounds, they can often direct us toward people who mirror the very pain we experienced as children. It's not always a conscious choice, of course. In fact, it often feels like we're seeking out love or companionship as a form of healing. But what we don't realize is that we are drawn to relationships that replicate the dynamics we grew up with. We may find ourselves, time and again, attracted to individuals who are emotionally unavailable, distant, or even neglectful. People who, for all their charm or appeal, ultimately cannot give us the kind of love and support we truly need. This isn't about being stupid or weak for loving someone who isn't capable of offering you anything in return. It's not about making poor choices intentionally. It's about a deeper, unconscious wound that leads us to recreate situations where we can experience familiar emotional patterns, even if they are painful or unfulfilling. In our minds, there is an unconscious belief that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different, that this person will somehow fill the emptiness that we've felt for so long. But what happens is that we keep chasing something that's not available to us, an emotionally fulfilling connection that we never received in our formative years. These wounds often begin in childhood, when we are most vulnerable. It could have been a parent who was emotionally distant, someone who, despite being physically present, never truly engaged with us in a meaningful way. Maybe there was an emotional disconnect that left us yearning for love, for attention, for understanding. But these needs were never met. Or perhaps, as children, we had to contend with the fear of abandonment, the deep feeling that those who were supposed to love us unconditionally might not always be there when we needed them the most. We were too young to understand these dynamics, and so we carried them forward with us into adulthood, where they continued to influence our relationships. As adults, we might not even recognize that our attraction to unavailable partners is rooted in these early experiences. But when we don't heal the wounds we carry, we unintentionally keep seeking the same dynamics. We might even tell ourselves that we're looking for something different, for someone who can give us everything we want. But what we're really doing is searching for a resolution to that deep, unspoken need from our childhood. We're searching for someone to fill the void, to provide the emotional security and love that we never got, and we often overlook the fact that the very person we are attracted to may be incapable of providing that kind of support. It's important to recognize that these patterns are not a result of poor decision-making. They are in many ways our psyche's attempt to resolve past wounds. It's almost like we're trying to rewrite the past. In seeking out someone who is emotionally unavailable, we may unconsciously be hoping that by loving them, we can finally receive the love and approval we were denied in childhood. We might think, if I love them enough, if I prove myself worthy enough, they'll change and become the person I need. This belief, while well-intentioned, is based on a deep misunderstanding of human behavior and, most importantly, a misunderstanding of ourselves. The truth is, no matter how much love, effort, or care we pour into someone who cannot give it back, it will never fill the wound. This kind of love is not the love that heals. It's the love that perpetuates the pain. The more we give, the less we receive, and the more we feel that nagging emptiness deep inside of us. It's a cycle that can be difficult to break, because it is rooted in an unconscious desire to fix something that cannot be fixed by someone who is not capable of offering what we need. In essence, we're using the wrong people to try to heal the wrong wound. Recognizing this pattern is the first step in breaking it. We must acknowledge that the relationships we're drawn to, the ones where we keep giving and receiving nothing in return, are not just random choices. They are the result of deeply ingrained emotional wounds that have shaped our desires, our expectations, and even our sense of self-worth. And though this can be a painful realization, it is also an empowering one. Once we recognize the wound, we can begin to heal it. Healing, however, requires a shift in perspective. Instead of looking outside ourselves for the love and validation we didn't receive in childhood, we must begin to look within. We must learn to love and validate ourselves in the way we always needed. This doesn't mean that we should close ourselves off from relationships altogether, but it does mean that we need to stop seeking healing from the very people who cannot offer it. Healing begins when we start to take responsibility for our own emotional well-being and stop relying on others to fix what's broken inside of us. This is not an easy journey, but it is a necessary one. And as we move forward, we can begin to recognize that the love we've been seeking in all the wrong places was always meant to come from within. Only then can we break free from the cycle of seeking out those who can give us nothing and start building relationships with people who are capable of offering the mutual respect, love, and emotional support that we deserve. When we carry emotional wounds, they often create a deep and persistent need for validation. This need can manifest in many areas of our lives, but it's particularly evident in our relationships. When we are wounded, whether from past neglect, abandonment, or emotional unavailability, we begin to seek love and affection in places that are familiar, even if they are ultimately unhealthy for us. This deep-rooted longing for validation leads us to form connections with people who are emotionally distant, detached, or simply incapable of offering us the kind of love we truly need. At the heart of this behavior is an unconscious desire to be seen and acknowledged in a way that we never were in our formative years. When we were children, perhaps we didn't receive the love and nurturing that would have helped us feel secure and validated. Maybe there was a parent who wasn't emotionally available, or perhaps love was conditional, given only when we met certain expectations, or withdrawn when we needed it most. These experiences left us with a deep yearning for validation, a hunger to be loved and accepted for who we truly are. But in adulthood, this need often drives us to seek validation from partners who cannot give it to us. It's a strange paradox, isn't it? The very people who are emotionally unavailable, the ones who can't offer us the love we crave, are often the ones we become most attached to. We convince ourselves that if we can just get them to notice us, if we can just prove our worth, they will eventually give us the love and approval we've been missing all along. We believe that by giving all of ourselves to them, by being patient and understanding, we will somehow earn the validation we so desperately seek. But this is the wound speaking, not our true selves. It's the part of us that was neglected, the part of us that still feels invisible and unheard. And it is this part of us that is constantly reaching out to people who are incapable of meeting our needs. What makes this even more complicated is that the person we are seeking validation from may not even be aware of the emotional support we need. They might be emotionally distant, unable to connect on the level that we crave, or simply indifferent to our emotional needs. Yet, we continue to chase their affection, hoping that one day they will change, that one day they will see us and give us the love we long for. We may find ourselves constantly trying to get their attention, trying to win their approval, even though deep down we know they are not capable of offering what we need. The wound that was formed in childhood, The need for validation and acceptance keeps pushing us into these relationships, hoping for a resolution that never comes. This dynamic is often fueled by the belief that if we just try harder, we can somehow fix the other person. We may believe that we can heal their wounds, just as we are attempting to heal our own. But the reality is that no amount of effort or love can change someone who is emotionally unavailable or incapable of giving the love we need. This belief is based on a deep misunderstanding of both ourselves and the other person. The desire for validation can cloud our judgment, making us believe that the problem lies in our inability to win them over or change them, when the true issue lies in the emotional imbalance of the relationship. What makes it even more painful is that this need for validation doesn't go away just because the other person is emotionally unavailable. Instead, it grows stronger, more insistent, as we continue to seek approval in all the wrong places. It creates a cycle of dependency and frustration, where we feel increasingly invisible, yet we can't seem to stop reaching for the very person who cannot see us. In these moments, we begin to question our own worth. We start to wonder if we are too much, too needy, too demanding, and we may even begin to internalize the belief that we are not worthy of love or attention. This, of course, only deepens the wound and makes it harder to break free from the cycle. The truth is, no amount of external validation can heal the deep wound of emotional neglect or abandonment. We may seek validation from others, but the real healing comes from within. To heal, we must first learn to validate ourselves, to accept ourselves as we are without needing someone else's approval. This requires us to confront the wound directly and acknowledge the ways in which we've been seeking validation from the wrong sources. It requires us to stop seeking approval from those who cannot give it to us, and begin to look inward for the love and acceptance that we've been longing for. Self-dedication is not about becoming self-centered or shutting ourselves off from others. It's about recognizing our own worth, not because of what someone else thinks of us, but because we know deep down that we are deserving of love and respect. It's about acknowledging the parts of ourselves that were wounded in the past, and offering ourselves the love and compassion that we so desperately needed but never received. Only then can we stop chasing after people who can't offer us the love we deserve. When we begin to validate ourselves, we break the cycle of seeking love from those who cannot provide it. We stop giving our hearts to people who are emotionally unavailable, and instead we start to attract relationships that are based on mutual respect and understanding. We learn that we don't need to prove our worth to anyone. Our worth is inherent, and once we recognize that, we can begin to form healthier, more fulfilling relationships. The journey to self-gratulation is not an easy one, and it doesn't happen overnight. It requires self-awareness, patience, and a willingness to confront the wounds of the past. But as we begin to heal and validate ourselves, we free ourselves from the need to seek validation from those who can give us nothing in return. And in doing so, we open ourselves to the possibility of deeper, more meaningful connections, ones that are based on true love and mutual respect. We all carry with us patterns that shape the way we approach relationships, the way we perceive love, and the way we respond to others. These patterns aren't just random. They are deeply ingrained behaviors that emerge from our unconscious mind. When we experience emotional wounds, especially in our early years, we tend to recreate those same situations over and over, hoping that this time things will be different. It's a psychological mechanism, almost like an unconscious attempt to resolve past pain by reenacting it, thinking that we can find closure or healing through repetition. This is especially true when it comes to relationships. When we don't heal from the wounds of our past, be it neglect, abandonment, or emotional unavailability, we find ourselves in a cycle of seeking out the same kinds of partners who mirror those very dynamics. We might even tell ourselves that we're looking for something different, for someone who will give us the love and affection we truly need. But in reality, what we're doing is unconsciously searching for a way to rewrite our past. We're hoping that this time we'll be able to fix the brokenness we've felt since childhood. But inevitably, we end up in the same emotional places, caught in a cycle of disappointment and frustration. The real danger here is not just that we repeat these patterns, but that we begin to believe in some part of ourselves that these patterns are all we deserve. We might even think that this is how love is supposed to look, that being in a relationship where we're not fully seen or understood is somehow normal, that if we just keep trying harder, we'll finally get the love and validation we were denied earlier in life. It's a dangerous belief because it keeps us stuck in situations where we're continually giving but never receiving what we need. We end up investing all of ourselves in relationships with people who, for various reasons, are incapable of offering us the emotional support we seek. This cycle of repetition can be incredibly painful because, on one hand, we recognize that we're not getting what we need, yet, on the other hand, there's a part of us that keeps pushing forward, believing that this time the result will be different. We try harder. We try to be more patient. We tell ourselves that if we just stick around long enough, the person will eventually see us and recognize our worth. But that hope often goes unfulfilled because the person we're with is not capable of offering us what we truly need. They may be emotionally unavailable or incapable of loving us in the way that we desire, but we persist in the belief that we can change them, that we can fix them. It's a common trap to fall into, the idea that if we just work hard enough, if we give enough, if we love enough, the other person will come around. But this belief stems from the deep emotional wounds we carry, from the longing to fix something that was broken in our past. When we unconsciously believe that we can heal someone else, we're not truly addressing our own wounds. Instead, we're distracting ourselves from our own pain by focusing on the idea that if we fix the other person, we'll somehow be healed. But that's never the case. You can't fix someone else's emotional unavailability, and you can't change someone's capacity to love. What you can do is address your own emotional needs and break free from the cycle of repeating the past. The issue is that these patterns are not easy to recognize, especially when they're deeply embedded in our unconscious mind. We don't see ourselves as being trapped in a cycle of repetition because, at first, everything feels familiar. We may even find comfort in these patterns because they echo the emotional dynamics we experienced growing up. But comfort doesn't mean that we're healthy or happy. Just because a relationship feels familiar doesn't mean it's the right one for us. These repetitive patterns of seeking out unavailable partners don't serve us. They keep us in a state of emotional stagnation. They don't allow us to move forward or to grow into the kinds of relationships we truly deserve. It's vital to recognize that breaking free from these patterns requires conscious effort. It means understanding that we're not doomed to keep reliving our past, that we don't have to continue seeking out the same emotional experiences over and over again. But this can be difficult because, on some level, we're still trying to resolve the wounds from our childhood. We still feel that deep need for love and validation, and so we keep searching for it in the wrong places. The key to breaking this cycle is to become aware of these unconscious patterns and to begin the process of healing the wounds that drive them. Healing isn't about waiting for someone else to change. It's about changing our own approach to love and relationships. It's about learning to recognize our own worth and acknowledging that we are deserving of love that is reciprocated, healthy, and supportive. This means we have to stop seeking validation from people who can't give it to us and start looking within for the love and acceptance that we crave. It's about understanding that we don't need to change someone else in order to heal. We need to heal ourselves. The first step in breaking the cycle of repetition is to recognize the pattern. We must become aware of the ways in which we're attracting emotionally unavailable people and start asking ourselves why. What is it about these dynamics that keep pulling us in? What are we hoping to achieve by continuing to give to someone who cannot offer us what we need in return? This awareness is the key to unlocking the door to healing. Once we see the pattern for what it is, we can begin to take the necessary steps to move forward. It's not about finding a way to fix the other person. It's about fixing ourselves, understanding our own emotional needs, and making choices that align with our true worth. The cycle of repetition will continue only as long as we allow it. But once we recognize it, once we stop trying to change others and start healing ourselves, we can break free from the patterns of the past. We can open ourselves to healthier, more fulfilling relationships that are based on mutual love, respect, and understanding. In breaking the cycle, we reclaim our power, and that power lies not in changing others, but in changing the way we relate to ourselves and the world around us. We often find ourselves in relationships that don't truly nourish us, even though we desperately want them to. We give so much of ourselves, our time, our attention, our energy, and yet somehow we still feel empty, unfulfilled, and even invisible. Why does this happen? The answer is rooted in something that's very subtle, but immensely powerful. Our unconscious mind. It has a profound influence on our choices, especially in relationships, and it often pushes us to settle for less than what we deserve. When we haven't healed the wounds of our past, whether they stem from childhood neglect, emotional abandonment, or a lack of validation, we often find ourselves in relationships where we're giving more than we're receiving. And while it may seem like a pattern of trying too hard or loving too much, the real issue lies in our subconscious need for approval. It's like we're constantly seeking out partners who mirror the emotional distance or unavailability we experienced growing up. We don't do this intentionally. We're not consciously trying to make ourselves suffer, but we keep attracting people who cannot meet our needs. And the reason is that these relationships are reflecting the very wounds we haven't healed yet. This dynamic is incredibly draining. We pour ourselves into relationships where the other person is emotionally distant or simply unable to give us the attention or affection we crave. And when this happens, we tend to internalize the belief that something is wrong with us, that maybe we're not lovable enough to receive the love we desire. We try harder, we give more, but no matter how much we invest, the other person remains unavailable, and we're left feeling exhausted, frustrated, and unappreciated. This imbalance, where one person gives and the other takes, creates an emotional void that is never filled. We may tell ourselves that if we just try a little harder, things will change. We might even rationalize the situation, convincing ourselves that the other person will eventually come around and recognize our worth. But the truth is, if someone is emotionally unavailable or incapable of meeting our emotional needs, no amount of effort will change that. The problem isn't with our ability to love or give. It's with the other person's inability or unwillingness to do the same. What happens next is the most dangerous part of this pattern. We begin to settle. We accept the crumbs of affection, the moments of attention that come in small, irregular bursts. And because it's all we've ever known, We convince ourselves that this is all we deserve. We might even begin to believe that this is the best we can get. After all, we're giving so much. Surely there's something wrong with us if we're not receiving the same level of care or affection in return. But that's the lie. The idea that we don't deserve more, or that we have to earn love by sacrificing our own needs. It's an idea born from the wounds of the past, from the times when we weren't validated or seen for who we truly are. It's important to understand that the person who is emotionally unavailable cannot fulfill our needs, and the person who takes and takes without giving back is not someone who values us in the way we deserve. Yet we keep giving, driven by the belief that maybe, just maybe, the other person will change, that with enough love we can fix things. The problem with this is that it keeps us stuck. We stay in relationships where we're not receiving what we need because, at a deep level, we're still trying to fix something that happened in our past. A past where love and validation were either absent or conditional. This kind of dynamic doesn't just affect our emotional well-being, it also affects our self-worth. When we're constantly giving to someone who cannot reciprocate, it leads to a gradual erosion of our sense of value. We start to feel like we're not enough. We begin to question our own worth because the love we're giving is not being returned. And when we internalize this idea that we're not worthy of love or attention, we end up in a vicious cycle. We become stuck in relationships that deplete us emotionally, unable to move on or break free because we've convinced ourselves that this is the kind of love we deserve. It's crucial to recognize that true love, the kind that nourishes and supports us, is not based on sacrifice or giving more than we receive. Healthy love is reciprocal. It's a relationship where both people give and receive in equal measure, where both people are emotionally available and invested in each other's well-being. When we find ourselves in situations where we're the only one giving, we have to stop and ask ourselves why we're staying. What are we hoping to get from this? What is it about this dynamic that keeps drawing us in? And most importantly, what are we sacrificing in the process? We must also recognize that our tendency to give too much, to stay in relationships that drain us, often comes from a deep-seated need for validation. We want to be seen. We want to be appreciated. But we've been conditioned to think that the way to get this is by sacrificing our own needs for someone else. This isn't healthy. This isn't self-love. And it certainly doesn't bring us closer to the kind of love we desire. To find real, fulfilling relationships, we must first learn to honor our own needs and set boundaries that protect our emotional well-being. It's not easy to break this cycle. It takes self-awareness, courage, and a willingness to face the deep wounds that have been influencing our behavior. But once we begin to acknowledge these patterns, we can start to make different choices. We can choose to stop giving to those who can't give back, and we can choose to stop accepting relationships that deplete us. We can begin to look for relationships that are rooted in mutual respect and emotional availability, where love is not a one-way street, but a shared experience. In the end, the journey is about learning to love ourselves first, about recognizing our own worth and refusing to settle for anything less than a relationship that brings us joy, fulfillment, and balance. Once we understand that, we can break free from the pattern of giving and never receiving, and that's when we begin to attract the love we've always deserved. There's a profound truth that often goes unnoticed in the midst of seeking love from others. We can only give what we have within ourselves. When we approach relationships from a place of emotional emptiness, when we are seeking love to fill a void, rather than to complement a well-rounded sense of self, we often find ourselves giving more than we have to offer. It's as if we're constantly trying to pour from an empty cup, hoping that somehow the act of giving will make us feel whole. But this is not the way that true connection is built. Relationships, as much as they involve giving, also require us to be full within ourselves. When we aren't emotionally healthy or self-sufficient, the giving we do doesn't come from a place of abundance, but from a place of lack. The truth is, when we find ourselves in relationships where we are constantly giving, whether it's our time, our energy, or our emotional availability, and we are receiving little to nothing in return, we begin to feel depleted. And if this continues long enough, we start to believe that we are the problem. We start to think that maybe we're not worthy of the love we desire, or that we're too much to handle. But in reality, the issue is not with who we are, but with how we are approaching the relationship and the expectations we've set for what we need to receive. When we give without replenishing our own emotional reserves, we begin to starve ourselves of the very love we are trying to give. And this, in turn, keeps us stuck in relationships where we are unable to receive love in a meaningful way. There's a delicate balance in relationships, one that must be grounded in mutual respect and reciprocity. True love doesn't come from constantly trying to prove ourselves or win approval from someone who isn't emotionally available. True love comes from a place of emotional wholeness, where we are already complete and have love to offer, not because we need it to fill an internal void, but because we genuinely want to share it with another person. But when we enter relationships with a sense of neediness, with an unconscious belief that the other person must validate our worth, we begin to give to an extent that leaves us emotionally drained. We pour ourselves into someone else's emotional tank, but we forget to fill our own. And as a result, we are left wondering why we feel so empty, despite all that we have given. This is the result of seeking validation from the wrong sources. We've all been there, the person who has shown us no interest or affection, but we continue to try harder, to be more present, to give more of ourselves in the hope that they'll eventually recognize our worth. But this is a path that leads nowhere. If the other person is emotionally unavailable or simply incapable of meeting our needs, no amount of effort will change that. We can't give love to someone who isn't ready or able to receive it. And even though we may tell ourselves that we can fix the other person, or that if we just show them how much we care, they'll change, we are only wasting precious emotional energy. In these situations, it becomes easy to overlook our own needs. We become so focused on the other person's emotional state and what they might need from us that we forget to check in with ourselves. We forget that we have needs too, needs that are just as important as theirs. And when we ignore our own emotional well-being, we begin to feel resentful, frustrated, and, ultimately, disconnected from who we truly are. We lose sight of our own worth, our own emotional needs, and our own capacity for love. We get so caught up in trying to make the relationship work that we forget to take care of ourselves. And in doing so, we lose the ability to truly give love. Because we've given away so much of ourselves that we have nothing left to offer. When we are emotionally depleted, we can no longer give freely. Love becomes an obligation rather than a gift. We give not because we want to, but because we feel like we must. We believe that we have to give everything in order to keep the other person around, or to prove that we are worthy of love. But this kind of giving is not healthy. It's not sustainable. And most importantly, it's not authentic. True love is not about giving everything we have to the other person in an attempt to win their affection. It's about offering love from a place of abundance, from a place of self-respect, and from a place of emotional well-being. Only when we are emotionally healthy Can we truly give in a way that nurtures the relationship rather than draining it? The key to breaking free from this cycle is learning to love ourselves first, to fill our own emotional tanks before we attempt to give to anyone else. This doesn't mean becoming self-centered or ignoring the needs of our partner. It means recognizing that our own needs are just as important as anyone else's, and that we are worthy of love, affection, and respect, just as much as the person we are with. When we take the time to nurture ourselves, to take care of our own emotional well-being, we no longer give from a place of neediness. We give because we have the capacity to do so, because we want to share our love and energy with another person, not because we need it to feel validated or complete. When we learn to love ourselves first, we set the standard for the kind of love we deserve. We stop settling for relationships that drain us and start seeking out connections that are built on mutual respect, understanding, and emotional availability. We recognize that love is not about sacrifice or giving more than we have. It's about balance, reciprocity, and shared emotional support. And when we are in a relationship where both people are emotionally available, where both people are able to give and receive in equal measure, that's when true love can flourish. The process of healing, of learning to love ourselves, is not an easy one. It takes time, effort, and a willingness to confront the parts of ourselves that we've been neglecting. But when we make the commitment to heal and to nurture our own emotional well-being, we open ourselves to a love that is more fulfilling, more meaningful, and most importantly, more authentic. Only then can we begin to give love in a way that nourishes not just the other person, but ourselves as well. And when we give from a place of fullness, the love we offer is transformative, not just for ourselves, but for the relationships we choose to cultivate. When we learn to love ourselves first, we are no longer giving from a place of lack. We are giving from a place of strength. As we navigate the complexities of relationships, we often find ourselves caught between our desires and our reality. We want love that is fulfilling, reciprocal, and nurturing, yet we often end up in situations where we give more than we receive. This pattern can leave us feeling unbalanced and unappreciated. But beneath this imbalance lies something deeper, an unresolved longing for validation, often rooted in the past. This deep-seated need to prove our worth through the love we give can make us stay in relationships that deplete us, even when we know, deep down, they are not giving us the love we truly deserve. At the heart of this issue is the unconscious drive to seek approval from others. From a young age, we are often taught that love is something to be earned, that our worth is defined by how much we give or how much we sacrifice for others. This belief can stem from childhood experiences where love was conditional, or from relationships where our needs were either ignored or dismissed. As a result, we grow up with the belief that we must continuously give of ourselves to be loved, that our value comes from what we do for others rather than who we are. This is the wound that shapes our approach to love and relationships. We might find ourselves seeking out partners who mirror this dynamic, partners who are emotionally distant or unable to provide the validation we seek. We may be drawn to people who can't offer the love and care we crave because, in some unconscious way, we are trying to recreate the emotional landscape of our past. But in doing so, we perpetuate the very cycle that leaves us feeling unfulfilled, ignored, or unworthy. It's as if we are continuously reaching for something that is just out of our grasp, hoping that one day we will finally get the love we need. But the reality is that the more we give to someone who cannot give back, the more we deepen the very wound we're trying to heal. This kind of behavior is not a conscious choice. It's not a matter of intentionally choosing to stay in unfulfilling relationships. It's driven by the unconscious belief that if we just give enough, will eventually receive the validation and love we're seeking. We pour our energy into someone who is emotionally unavailable, hoping that our love will change them, that they will see us for who we truly are. But this is a false hope. The reality is that people can only give what they are capable of giving. And if they are emotionally unavailable or unwilling to meet our needs, no amount of effort will change that. We can't change someone who isn't ready or willing to change. But the deeper issue lies in our own willingness to accept this behavior, to settle for less than we deserve, and to ignore our own emotional needs. We often mistake this need for validation as love, believing that if we just continue to give and love enough, eventually we will be worthy of being loved in return. But this approach only drains us. The truth is, love is not about sacrifice. It's not about proving our worth through the things we do for others. Love is about mutual respect, understanding, and emotional availability. It's about both people in the relationship being able to give and receive equally. When one person is constantly giving and the other is taking, the relationship becomes imbalanced and unhealthy. And no matter how much we give, it will never be enough to fill the void created by an emotionally unavailable partner. So why do we continue to find ourselves in these situations? Why do we keep giving when we know it's not being returned? The answer lies in the deep-seated fear of abandonment, of not being enough. We have this unconscious belief that if we stop giving, we will lose the person we are with, that we will not be worthy of love if we don't constantly prove ourselves. But this fear is rooted in insecurity, not reality. The truth is, when we continuously give without receiving in return, we are only reinforcing the belief that we are not worthy of love unless we sacrifice ourselves. We become so caught up in the idea that our value is dependent on how much we give that we forget that true love comes from a place of balance, not depletion. The key to breaking free from this cycle is learning to set boundaries and recognize our own worth. It's about realizing that we do not need to prove ourselves to anyone. Our value is not defined by what we do for others, but by who we are. When we start to love ourselves, to acknowledge our own needs, and to honor our emotional well-being, we begin to shift the dynamic. We no longer accept relationships where we are constantly giving without receiving. We start to seek out relationships that are rooted in mutual respect and emotional availability. Relationships where both people give and receive in equal measure. This shift is not easy. It requires us to confront our deepest fears, to challenge the beliefs that have shaped our approach to love, and to make the difficult decision to stop settling for less than we deserve. But it is also incredibly liberating. When we stop seeking validation through our relationships and start seeking love that nourishes us, we begin to open ourselves to a different kind of connection, one that is based on equality, respect, and mutual care. And as we learn to fill our own emotional needs and set boundaries,